All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Mr. Wilkie's Tutoring Videos. Today we're going to be talking about writing quadratic equations in factored form. And this is a new form that we're introducing, factored form. And before we get there, we're going to have to refresh on a couple of vocab words, okay? First off, we know quadratic equations. A quadratic is any function or expression that has the highest exponent in there on my variable, the x, is 2. Okay, the largest exponent is 2, of degree 2. Okay, so that's quadratic. Then you're also going to need to know what these things are. Zeros, roots, solutions, and x-intercepts. Okay, these are all the same gosh darn thing, right? I promise you, they're all the same thing. And those are where the graph of the quadratic touches or crosses the x-axis. Okay, that is all where the graph of the quadratic touches or crosses the x-axis. All right, that is zeros, roots, solutions, and x-intercepts. All right, now we need to really dig into the new vocabulary, and that is factored form. Factored form for a quadratic is going to look something like this. Okay, f of x equals x, and we're going to have plus or minus. One of those two signs will be there, and then some number, parentheses, and then another set, x plus or minus some number, parentheses. Okay, that's factored form. We don't know what these numbers are yet, but I'll show you how to find them in just a minute. But this is kind of what the form looks like. It's going to have two sets of parentheses, and inside the parentheses, there's going to be a polynomial or a binomial. Polynomial just means many terms, one, two terms in that one. A binomial means two terms. So this set of parentheses has one term, the x term, and then another number here. That's the second term. Okay. So this is what factored form is going to look like. Now, let's move into our first example. Okay. So let's look at this example. F of x equals x squared minus 2x minus 24. Okay. Now, why did I bring up zeros, roots, solutions, x-intercepts? Because we're going to need that in order to write this form. We're going to need that because we're going to have to graph this thing. So first, we need to find the zeros, or the roots, or solutions, or the x-intercepts. That's what we need to do first. So let's do that. All right. I'm going to pull out Desmos. If you're using a TI Inspire, remember you can still graph it on a graph, and then you just need to trace it. So graph trace, menu, trace, graph trace, and it'll let you move along that graph. Okay, so now I'm going to graph the function I'm working with here. So we're going to graph x squared. Now remember, in Desmos, you can also, if you want to, you can put f of x. You can actually type it just as you see it. F of x equals x squared minus 2x minus 24. Okay, so there's my function. And I need to know the zeros, the roots, the solutions, the x-intercepts for this function. Okay, so let's go to our x-intercept and see where they are. Tap the graph. See these gray dots pop up right here, right there, and right there. And those are the dots I want, so I'm going to tap on each one and get it to show the points. So my zeros are negative 4 comma 0 and 6 comma 0. Okay, so I'm going to write those down. My zeros are negative 4 comma 0 and 6 comma 0. Okay, and notice because these things are sitting on our x-axis, the y value for each coordinate point, remember, these are x comma y points, okay, on the Cartesian coordinate plane. Our y values are 0. That means they're on the x-axis. So is this one. It's on the x-axis because the y is 0. All right, so now that we have that, we can actually go straight to our factored form. So here we go. So I'm going to write my factored form. That's the second step. And this really is a two-step process. Once you graph and find the zeros, then you write the factored form using this information. All right, so let's keep filling her in. And I know I'm going to have an x here and an x here. All right. Now, if you go back to our definition where we define what factored form is, right here I've got plus or minus. And that's really going to be determined by what the zeros are. Because as you may have thought, the zeros are going to go here and here in these boxes, okay, where we have empty space. But what we have to make sure that we do is we have to change the sign of whatever is given to us. So if I'm using the 0, negative 4 to fill in this one, this set of parentheses, then because this guy is a negative 4, in here I'm going to put positive 4. Okay? And because this 0, this root, this solution for this quadratic equation is positive 6 comma 0, down here I'm going to put negative 6. I'm going to change the sign. Okay, negative 6. And I'm missing something here, and it's because really in this we don't need it, but right here in front of this guy, you're going to have an a value, okay? And it will be the same as the a value up here from our standard form. In this case, our a value was 1, so you could put a 1 there. It won't change anything. But really what this does is help you know if the graph is open up or open down. So if this a value is greater than 1, it's going to open upwards. And if this a value is less than 1, meaning if it's a negative, it's going to open down. Okay, and here's an example. The graph opening down. Okay, that one opens down versus this one opening up. Okay. So, there's our first example. Here are our zeros, and then here's the factored form. All right, let's look at example number 2. Okay. For example number 2, I'm going to be using the function f of x equals x squared plus 6x minus 27. X squared plus 6x minus 27. So first thing we got to do is find our zeros. So let's graph that. F of x equals x squared plus 6x minus 27. Okay, so here's our new quadratic function. You can see if we tap on here, we're going to get gray dots in. Let me zoom in a little bit. See the gray dots? Tap on it again, you get gray dots, and then tap on your zeros. It'll tell you what the values are. So our zeros are negative 9 comma 0 and 3 comma 0. So here, my zeros are negative 9 comma 0 and 3 comma 0. Okay, so that was finding the zeros. First, we're going to find the zeros. All right, now we're going to write factored form. Okay, and this time I'm going to leave space for the a value, just so you can see it there. Okay. All right, here we go. Now that we have the zeros, we have to remember that when we take our numbers to fill in the number that goes back here, we're going to change the sign. So from -9, the number that I get to go in down here is going to be +9. I'm just changing that sign. Okay. And from +3, I'm going to get -3. Okay, I'm just going to change the sign. And then last but not least, my a value is going to go right here. So if we go back up to our original function here, my a value is the value or the coefficient in front of the x squared term. Well, since there's no number there, you know it's just a 1. So we're just going to put a 1 in here. And that means, because it's positive, the a is positive, it's opening upward. It's a standard quadratic graph. Okay, open up. With roots -9 and 3. Okay. Example number 3. Okay, for example number 3, we're going to be using this function, f of x equals x squared minus 12x plus 28, and remembering that our first step in this, is to find the roots. Okay, I'm going to graph it. When a problem comes along, you must graph it. Okay, and I'm a huge fan of Desmos. Okay, huge fan of Desmos. So let's x squared minus 12x plus 28. Okay, so you'll notice my zeros are a lot closer now. Not a problem, still the same process. Oh no, it seems like we have some decimals, and that doesn't look pretty, but that's okay. We can still do it. Don't freak out. Okay, we can still do it. My zeros are 3.172, 0, and 8.828, 0. Those are my zeros, 8.828, 0. Okay. All right, so step number 2. Second step is write factored form. Okay, so let's do that. Again, I'm going to leave some space for the a value. Okay, and once again, when we bring down this value to put in here in this parentheses, we're going to change the sign. So because this is a positive, down here I'm going to have negative 3.172. Okay. And up here, because this is a positive, down here I'm going to have a negative 8.828. I keep doing that. All right. And last but not least, we need to know what our a value is, because a is going to go right here. Okay, right in front. So my a value is right here, and it's a 1. So again, we're open up. And for the last example. All right, here's our quadratic for the last example here. And again, the first step is to graph it. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to get Desmos out. We're going to graph this thing. And while I'm working, first thing I'm going to notice is what happens to this graph that we haven't seen yet. This one's actually open down. It's flipped the other way than what we've seen so far. But we don't change any part of our process. We're still looking for zeros, roots, solutions, x-intercepts, and they're right there. -3, 0, 8, 0. So that's what we're using. My zeros are -3, 0 and 8, 0. So I'm going to write the factored form. Leave some room for a here. Okay. Now, when I bring down these numbers, I'm going to change the sign. So I have a -3 here, which means this is going to be a +3. I have a +8 here, which means this is going to become a -8. Okay. And last thing is I'm going to look at my a value. A is going to go right here. Okay. Now, in this one, there's no number here, but we have a sign for sure. So I'm still going to put a 1, but recognize that the a value this time is negative a value. Okay, so if you don't put this -1 here, then your graph, the function u graph, will be flipped up. It'll be the wrong way. Okay, and we can actually check our answers. Okay, we can actually check our answers for every one of these problems we do. You want to check your answer? Not a problem. This is the function we started with up here. This is the function we created. That should be the same thing. Okay? So, what happens when we graph what we created, okay, in Desmos? What happens if we add that graph? Well, what I created was this one. F of x equals, we have a -1, parentheses, x plus 3, close your parentheses, open a new pair, x minus 8, close your parentheses. And look what happened. There's the green graph, our new one, our answer. And then if I hit this one, there's the blue graph. Green graph, blue graph. It's the same graph. It's the same thing. Okay? And if you really want to get into it, you can hit the settings here and then hit this guy and make this a dashed line or a dotted line. And you can even see that both of those lines, in between those green beads, you can see the blue. Okay? You can see it. So they are the same exact graph, which means that our answer here, this guy, is the same thing as this guy. They just look different. Okay? And that is writing quadratic equations in factored form from standard form using a graph. Okay? Thank you very much. Have a nice night.